If I told you that in 1972, inside the glowing halls of the Las Vegas Hilton, Elvis and Priscilla had a fight so deep, so cutting, that it almost shattered the love America believed would last forever, would you stay with me long enough to hear what really happened? Because tonight, you're going to see the night their marriage almost broke. From the inside. And if you're here right now, let me tell you something. Listen closely. This isn't gossip. This isn't tabloid noise. This is the moment, the night, that altered everything between them. The crowd buzz was roaring on the other side of the curtain. The spotlight hum vibrated like a heartbeat waiting to burst open. People were chanting his name, Elvis, Elvis, Elvis. But backstage, Elvis Presley was the king. He was a husband with a heart that had just been bruised by the only woman whose opinion could shake him to his core. He stood there in his white jumpsuit, adjusting the collar with slow, shaky breaths. His eyes weren't on the mirrors. They were replaying a sentence Priscilla had just said to him. A sentence he couldn't ignore. A sentence he was scared to believe. Priscilla stepped into the hallway. Beautiful, composed, yet distant in a way he had never seen before. Her arms folded across her stomach, her face calm but cold. The calm of someone who has learned to stop fighting. And that silence hurt Elvis more than any argument ever had. And if you looked at her that night, you'd notice it instantly. She wasn't angry. She was tired. Tired of the tour, the long nights, the whispered rumors. And the way her life kept bending around his storms. For one brief second, their eyes met. Nothing was said. Nothing needed to be. And right here where the first mid-hook hits the audience. What did she tell him moments before the show? That froze him in place more than the roar of 10,000 fans ever could. The announcer shouted, "Ladies and gentlemen, Elvis Presley." The hall exploded. The floor shook. People rose to their feet as if the world itself was celebrating. But Elvis didn't move. Not at first. He looked toward Priscilla. For comfort, for connection, for the small smile she always gave him before he walked out. Tonight, she didn't smile. She didn't nod. She didn't even soften her gaze. She simply looked at him, as if she wasn't sure he was still the man she married. And that, more than anything, cut through him. He walked on stage with applause crashing around him, but carrying the weight of a private truth no one in that audience would ever know. The music started. The lights rose. The legend performed. But behind every song, behind every movement, behind every smile, something was breaking. Something neither of them said out loud. Something both were afraid to say out loud. And now, as Act 1 ends, here are the exact 3 open loops that will pull your viewers straight into Act 2. What confession did Priscilla make that shook Elvis moments before he walked on stage? Why did Elvis' hand tremble during the opening song, as if he was reliving a painful memory he had buried for years? And what final blow, delivered later that night, shattered the last bit of peace between them? And now, here's the extra hook line that locks the audience in. Because if you think the world knew the real reason their marriage began to fall apart, wait until you hear what happened after the show. If you think Elvis Presley always walked into a room like a king, think again. Because what happened next shocked even the people who thought they knew him best. But before I tell you what he saw, I answer this. Why would the most powerful star in America suddenly freeze mid-sentence? As if someone else was standing in the room who wasn't supposed to be there. Nobody knew it yet. But this was the moment Elvis' life quietly split into before and after. Elvis stepped inside the dim hallway of Graceland, still holding that mysterious envelope like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Every footstep echoed. Every shadow looked alive. Every sound tricked his brain into thinking someone was following him. But here's the part nobody expected. Elvis wasn't scared of people. He was scared of truths he could no longer run from. The envelope's corner was crushed from how hard he'd been gripping it. He didn't even notice his hands were shaking. And then, right before reaching the closed door at the end of the hall, he whispered something under his breath. A single line, You want to know what he said? You'll hear it soon and it changes everything. He reached for the doorknob, paused, and then pulled his hand back like the metal had burned him. Because suddenly a voice echoed in his head. If you open that door, nothing in your life stays the same. You ever felt that? That one moment where your next step could destroy you. Or save you? That's exactly where Elvis was standing. And here's the strangest twist of all. The door wasn't locked. It was never locked. He still hesitated. Why? What was behind it? What was he trying not to remember? And what truth was waiting to punch him right in the soul? He took one deep breath, pushed the door open, and stepped into the room. That's when he realized something was wrong. Very wrong. The air felt colder than the rest of the house. The lights flickered like they were struggling to decide if they wanted him there. And the silence, so heavy it felt intentional. Like the room had been waiting for him. Waiting to expose him. Waiting to finish a story he thought he'd buried. This wasn't just a room inside Graceland. This was the place where Elvis stopped being invincible and started becoming human. And here's the craziest part. He hadn't even opened the envelope yet. What was inside it? Who sent it? And why did it shake Elvis more than fame, money, or death ever could? You'll see in Act 3. But once you know, you'll never look at Elvis the same way again. Before Elvis even sat down, the room did something strange. It felt smaller, tighter, almost like it didn't want him inside. And that's when a question hit him. A question that would terrify any man alive. How did this letter get inside a room only I have the key to? Because here's the part fans never knew. Graceland had secrets. But this room, this was the one nobody talked about. Not his friends, not his inner circle, not even his closest family members. This room was Elvis's private vault of memories. The place he hid things he didn't want the world to see. So if a letter suddenly appeared here, someone had crossed a line. A dangerous one. Elvis sat down slowly, the envelope trembling in his hands. He stared at it like it might bite him. It wasn't sealed. It wasn't taped. It wasn't even folded neatly. It looked urgent. Like whoever wrote it didn't care how it looked. They just wanted him to read it now. He slipped his thumb under the flap and stopped. Because right before opening it, Elvis noticed something he had completely missed. His name was written on the front, in a handwriting he hadn't seen in years. A name he had spent a lifetime trying not to think about. A person he thought was gone forever. A person who once knew him better than anyone on Earth. But here the real punch. That person wasn't supposed to know this room existed. And yet the handwriting was unmistakable. It shouldn't be possible. So before he even opened the letter, another question punched him right in the chest. If this is really from them, how did they find me? He finally pulled the letter out. Just one page. One sentence. Written in the same haunting handwriting. You want to know what it said, right? You want to see the line that made Elvis push his chair back like someone had stabbed him. You will, but not yet. Because before you read those words, you need to understand something bigger. This wasn't just a message. It was a warning, a reminder, and a threat all at once. A message that reached into the darkest part of his past and ripped open a wound he had tried to bury under fame, music, and money. And the most chilling part, it wasn't signed. Just that single sentence. No names, no dates, no explanation. Just a message that made the king of rock and roll feel small, mortal, and haunted. Elvis looked up at the doorway, and for the first time in years, his heartbeat didn't match the rhythm of a stage. It matched the rhythm of fear. Now the real question becomes, what did the letter say? And who had the power to paralyze Elvis Presley with a single sentence? You'll see in Act 4. And trust me, that's where everything flips upside down. Elvis unfolded the page. And for a moment, the world around him felt silent. Just one sentence. Short, cold, too familiar. You broke the promise and now it's coming back. That was it. No signature. No initials. Nothing. But Elvis didn't need a name. Because only one person on Earth knew about that promise. A promise he made long before the fame. Long before Graceland. Long before the world crowned him the king. A promise that wasn't supposed to survive the past. And yet the past had found a way back to him. And here's the real twist. Elvis never told Priscilla about that promise. Not once. Which created a new fear. He wasn't ready to face. If this person was reaching out again, what else might surface? And what would Priscilla do? If she discovered the one thing Elvis had buried deeper than all his secrets. He stood up from the chair, letter in his hand, and walked toward the doors. But right as he reached the hallway, another thought hit him. A thought that made him freeze. Someone placed this letter inside his private room. Meaning, whoever delivered it had access. Real access. Inside Graceland. Inside his life. Inside the one place no one was allowed to cross. Which raised a terrifying possibility. Was this someone he trusted? Someone still in the house? Someone watching him right now? Elvis turned his head slowly, almost expecting to see someone at the end of the corridor. Nothing, just shadows. But Graceland didn't feel safe anymore. It felt invaded. He walked to the living room, the letter tucked tight in his hand, like he was afraid it might vanish if he didn't hold it enough. Priscilla was sitting on the couch reading a magazine, completely unaware of the storm that had just punched into Elvis's world. She looked up and smiled, but that smile faded instantly. Elvis's face told the whole story. Something was wrong. Something deep. Something he didn't want to say. And Priscilla, being Priscilla, noticed the letter before he could hide it. Her eyes narrowed, with the kind of instinct a woman only gets after years of loving someone who keeps too much inside. Elvis, what's that? A simple question, but one that hit him harder than the letter itself. Because how do you explain a threat from a past you never told her existed? How do you tell the woman you love that someone out there knows a version of you she has never met? He hesitated, and that single hesitation did more damage than the words could. Priscilla didn't need answers. She saw everything in his silence. And here where the first crack appeared. Small but deadly. Are you hiding something from me? Elvis didn't answer. He couldn't. And that silence didn't just hang in the room. It spread. It settled between them. It changed the air. That moment, that single second, became the beginning of something neither of them saw coming. A fracture, a fear, a distance that would grow much faster than either of them imagined. But the real shock, the person behind that letter, wasn't just reaching out. They were already closer than Elvis ever realized. That truth comes in Act 5. The night had stretched long, and the echoes of Elvis's song still hung in the Las Vegas Hilton. The applause had faded into memory, leaving only the soft strum of a single guitar from somewhere backstage. Elvis stood near the wall, letter in hand, staring at it like it might explode at any moment. Priscilla approached quietly, her eyes sharp, reading him like she always did. She wasn't angry, she was wary. And that cautious look was more dangerous than any outburst they had ever had. He finally spoke, almost under his breath. I never thought this would come back, he said. Not like this, not now. Priscilla's hand grazed the silk handkerchief he always carried, the one he used to wipe his brow on stage. It had been tucked in his pocket for years, a tiny symbol of comfort he never admitted needing. Now it felt like their last thread of normalcy. Who sent it? She asked, her voice steady but heavy. She was holding herself together in a way that made Elvis realize just how much strength she carried, far more than he ever gave her credit for. Then he told her the name, the past, the promise he had tried to bury. It wasn't an enemy. It wasn't a stranger. It was someone from their own circle, someone who knew every corner of their private world. Someone who had been watching them, testing them, reminding them of what they could lose. And suddenly everything clicked. The tremble in his hand during the opening song, the look she gave him backstage, the distance he had felt all evening. It wasn't just exhaustion. It was fear. Fear of being exposed. Fear of losing her. Fear of a love he had taken for granted. Priscilla's eyes softened as she reached out. She didn't ask questions anymore. She didn't demand explanations. She simply held his hand. And in that touch, Elvis realized something critical. No matter what the past threw at them, they were still a team. Still bound by something deeper than fame, fortune, or fear. But the reveal had one last punch. The envelope contained more than the threatening note. Inside was a photograph, a moment frozen years ago, showing someone from their inner circle in a place they should never have been. It was proof that their private world wasn't private at all. It explained the tremble, the fear, the distance. And suddenly the audience, the world, was not what mattered. Only each other did. Priscilla lifted his handkerchief, holding it between them. It wasn't just fabric anymore. It was a bridge, a symbol of trust, of endurance, of a fragile love that refused to break. Then Elvis played the first note on his guitar. A single soft strum. It was quiet but resonant. And in that note, the tension began to release. The secret that nearly ended their love had been revealed. And while it didn't erase the fear or the betrayal entirely, it gave them a fighting chance to reconnect, at least for now. But there was still one final loop left unanswered. Could this love survive the fame, the temptations, the whispers, and the shadows that always followed them? The answer would come in the next act. The handkerchief still rested between them. The guitar strummed softly in the background. And for the first time that night, the air felt like it could hold hope again. The real turning point had arrived. The moment that defined not only their evening, but the rest of their fragile, intense, and unforgettable story. The night had finally quieted. The Las Vegas Hilton was emptying, leaving only the faint hum of a spotlight on the stage and the soft echo of footsteps in the hallway. Elvis stood alone for a moment, the envelope now folded neatly in his pocket. And then he noticed it. The silk scarf he had held hours before, the one that had trembled in his hands as fear and uncertainty coursed through him, it was still there, resting on the edge of the dressing table. It hadn't moved. It hadn't disappeared. He picked it up, running his fingers over the soft fabric. A symbol finally not of luck or fragility, but of endurance. Of love that had been tested, threatened, and nearly broken, but had survived. Priscilla entered quietly, her presence still calm but resolute. She reached for the scarf, holding it gently between them. No words were spoken. They didn't need words. The scarf said everything, the tremble, the fear, the hope, the fight, and ultimately the survival of their bond. For the first time that night, Elvis let himself exhale. The tension, the shadow of doubt, the fear of betrayal, they all loosened in that single shared glance. He realized that love, even when tested by secrecy, miscommunication, and fame, could endure. That promise he had once feared losing, the one that had almost destroyed them, was not gone. It was merely transformed. He thought back to the letter, to the photograph, to the tremble in his hand during the opening song. Every fear had its moment, every doubt had its reason, and yet here they were. Together, surviving, even stronger. Elvis lifted the scarf, brushing it across Priscilla's hands. The fabric that had once signaled fragility now marked resilience. And for the first time, he felt a quiet pride, not in his fame, not in his music, not in the applause of thousands, but in the endurance of a love that had seen its darkest night and survived. As they walked down the hallway together, the fading spotlight cast long shadows, merging their figures into one. It was a moment of reflection, of recognition, and of gratitude. They knew the world would always watch, always judge, always whisper, but in that moment none of it mattered. Elvis and Priscilla had faced the secrets, the threats, the letters, and the fears. They had confronted what almost ended them. And they had chosen to continue, hand in hand, scarf in hand, love intact. The hallway echoed softly as they reached the quiet of the exit. The applause from earlier was now a memory, but it was theirs forever if only in their hearts. The legacy of that night wasn't a performance. It wasn't a photograph or a headline. It was survival. It was connection. It was love that refused to break. And in that realization, the final open loop resolved. The love they nearly lost was not lost at all. It had endured every test, every fear, every shadow from the past. Elvis tucked the scarf into his jacket pocket one last time. It would always remind him. Love, when genuine, can survive even the darkest of nights. Even when the world seems determined to challenge it. The hallway lights dimmed as they exited. The sound of the spotlight faded into silence. And yet the warmth of what survived lingered, quiet, powerful, unshakable. The king had walked into darkness and found the light of his love waiting at the end. The hallways of Graceland were quiet now. The roar of thousands of fans had faded into memory, a soft echo that lingered like the last note of a song you never want to end. Elvis and Priscilla walked slowly through the empty rooms, their hands brushing together occasionally, a silent reassurance that the night's storms hadn't broken them. They paused near the stage where the spotlight had once shone so brightly. The memory of applause, now faint, hung in the air, not loud, not demanding, but gentle, almost like a whisper of what had been and what had survived. It was a reminder that life, like music, has crescendos and falls, moments of brilliance and moments of shadow. And it's how we endure them that shapes who we truly are. That night, everything they had feared, the secrets, the letters, the misunderstandings, had tested the limits of their love. And yet, in facing the darkness together, they had discovered a truth many never see. Love is not about perfection, fame, or grand gestures. It is about showing up, even when the heart trembles, even when fear threatens, even when the world seems intent on tearing you apart. Priscilla glanced at Elvis, a soft smile on her lips, and he returned it. No words were needed. The handkerchief, the scarf, the letter, they were all symbols now, markers of a journey they had survived. Moments that could have destroyed them had instead reminded them how resilient they were, how deep their connection ran. And as they stepped into the quiet night beyond Graceland's doors, the soft, fading memory of applause followed them, not as a spectacle, but as a symbol of what lasts when the noise fades. Love, trust, and memory. Their story was not just about challenges, secrets, or threats. It was about the human heart, fragile yet unbreakable, capable of enduring storms it never asked for. And in that endurance, it found pride, intimacy, and finally, reflection. Some lessons are loud, some are quiet. But the most important ones stay with you forever. And the legacy of this night, the night that nearly ended them, reminds us all, even in fame, even in fear, love can survive. The echoes of the fading applause were gone now. Only the memory remained, soft and persistent, like the gentle beat of a heart that refuses to give up. It was a sound that would carry them forward quietly, endlessly together. Disclaimer: some moments are lightly dramatized for narrative effect. And maybe, just maybe, stories like these remind us that love, music, and memory never fade. If this touched your heart, share it and subscribe for more. And it's the kind of twist that makes the whole story flip.